Hey everybody, this is another how I would use this book in a role-playing game. This time the book is Lost in Math. This is my second go-through on this. The first video didn't quite record all the way through, so this is my second attempt. But anyway, here we go. Lost in Math by Sabine Hossenfelder. I hope I said that name right. She is a YouTuber. I follow her channel. That's how I found out about the book. And I thought, well, I'll try the book because I enjoy her YouTube channel, so her book must be interesting. And her book, she's a theoretical physicist, and her book is about theoretical physics. But it also covers math in general, and it covers science in general. Found it very interesting. So what she's exploring is the idea of beauty, the human ideal of beauty, and how it's being used in science and how it might be disrupting science. It's a fascinating premise. The book is full of science. It gets a little mathy in places, but it wasn't anything I wasn't able to follow. But I could see it being tough if you're not really into math. But she's got a great sense of humor. So there are quite a few parts that made me laugh. It's kind of a dry sense of humor and a little sarcastic, but it's great. It comes through on her YouTube channel too. I really enjoy it. Her YouTube channel, I really recommend checking it out. So anyway, I'll just go through it here, a few little things, and I'll try and explain how I'd use it in a role-playing game. There's just a few little notes and stuff that I made on this. The LHC, Large Hadron Collider, hasn't seen anything that would support newly invented laws of nature. Newly invented laws of nature that she's talking about, I believe, are supersymmetry, maybe some other ones. So here's one of the parts that I found funny. I have come to recognize the usefulness of quoting dead people to support my convictions. Still makes me crack up. I think that's pretty funny. You know, that's a thing. The reliance on old dead people and quoting old dead people. That's got to be kind of holding science back a little bit, I think. And then this is another one. Until the end of the 19th century, it was quite common for scientists to view nature's beauty as a sign of divinity. Now, if I were going to use this book, some of the stuff I've taken away in this book, in an RPG game, that is one way I would do it, as I would have perhaps like a planet or a community, say a religious community in the solar system, in the galaxy. So if it was a traveler campaign, let's say, so covers a large portion of the galaxy, I would have a faction, or maybe all science would be a religious order, and where they did actually try and justify divinity, or they tried to justify a god, or perhaps they saw the universe itself as God. But what they took as a sign or a evidence that their hypothesis was right is the beauty that they see in the universe would be a sign of God. I know that's kind of an old way of looking at it, but it isn't, because as she points out, that's basically what scientists are still, particularly theoretical physicists, are still trying to find beauty in their theories. If their theories aren't beautiful enough, then they don't think their theory could possibly be true. If their theory isn't naturalistic, they think that it couldn't be true. And the reality is, as she points out, and I quite agree with her, and I thought this even before I read the book, that human ideals of beauty aren't necessarily compatible with how the universe works, the inner workings, the clockwork engines of the universe. They might be very complicated. They might have a beauty to them that we can't understand, that just looks plain ugly to us. It's entirely possible. I mean, why not? Okay, here we go. Here's a quote. This is from A Beautiful Question. And it's, quote, "Our fundamental sense of beauty is not in very direct way adapted to nature's fundamental workings." Again, that's basically what I was saying is, and the thing is, and she points it out in this book too, and I think it's a good point, is that the human perspective on the universe is extremely limited. We have a limited range of electromagnetic the electromagnetic radiation that we can see and interact with, such as light, and so most of the universe is invisible to us. And there are other aspects of our physical limitations, perhaps our shortness of our short lifespans, perhaps our inability to see beyond the speed of light. So we've got the great firewall of the speed of light. We can't see beyond that. There's all kinds of ways in which our sort of human frailties could interfere with our ability to understand the universe and even perceive it. Not to mention, it's entirely possible that our brains just aren't capable of uncovering all the laws of physics. As later on, she sort of, she doesn't make that claim, but it is sort of hinted at, I believe. So here we go. Here's another one. I'm not sure which is worse, or which I find worse, scientists who believe in arguments from beauty, or scientists who deliberately mislead the public about prospects of costly experiments. This is an interesting thing. I've seen her, she has made comments about this on YouTube too, and I guess there's a new collider that the scientific community is trying to put together, and even though the last one that was put together in France, that great big one, hasn't really found much evidence of any kind of new theories or hasn't supported any of the new hypotheses or whatever. The thinking is that the reason for that is that you need to go to higher energy levels in order to verify those theories and hypotheses. They didn't find it at these low energy levels, therefore they need to make a bigger collider. That doesn't really hold water, and she explains why. I think it's worth. I think this is a really good book. It's worth reading. Here is just Naturalness. I already talked about that. This is one I find interesting. And if that experiment didn't find anything, the predictions were revised to fall within the scope of the next upcoming experiment. There's a thing in science called cooking. Boy, that sounds like cooking. If your models, if you create a model, you have a hypothesis, you create a model, or you have some data and you create a model, and that model is unable to predict the future, okay. You probably need more. You need to reevaluate. But more importantly, if your model can't predict the past, a model needs to predict the future, and the model needs to be able to predict the past. Both. Being able to only work in one direction is a really big red flag. Time can work in both directions. We perceive as humans. We perceive an arrow of time moving into the future, but in reality, time has no arrow, as far as anyone can tell. That seems to just be a perception. So there's no reason something can't run in reverse, and it's a part of having models, computer models, whether they're for pandemics, whether they're for weather, whatever the hell they're for, earthquakes. The models have to be able to model what transpired as well as show what might happen in the future. If it can't do that, it's not a good model. It needs to be thrown out. Toss it. And don't just tweak it and try and make it run better. Because you're working off a bad hypothesis. That's my opinion anyway. I'm not a scientist though, so So this is another interesting thing, going towards the idea of a religious cult that's scientific. Simple, naive deism dressed up in scientific language. Here's another quote. I like. David Gross finds that, quote, "it smells of angels," unquote. All right, so I found that myself. I found that kind of funny. Again, the idea that scientists could be religious, they really could. They really could, especially as demonstrated right now, as we're moving away from the Enlightenment and we're embracing whatever it is that science is currently doing. I'm not a scientist, but it's obvious as hell to me. Scientists can deny it if they want, but, it's kind of like denying the color red is red. I've read enough books. I understand the Enlightenment enough to know that it's falling apart. What's this one? Oh yes, I absolutely love this. There are so many ways to explain something. Or sorry, there are so many ways not to explain something, and this is in relation to supersymmetry, but it's also she's basically discussing the idea of just constantly tweaking theories that don't have any kind of that can't be can't be proved through experiments, can't be falsified. That's not even really a hypothesis at that point. If you can't test it and you can't falsify it, it's philosophy. And she does discuss that. And that's another idea, is this cult that, say, spreads through the galaxy or whatever, of scientists could have that Achilles heel. What's this one? Yeah, okay, so this is another one. Quote, there are physicists now saying they don't have to test their ideas because they are such good ideas, George says. He leans forward across the table and stares at me. Quote, they're saying explicitly or implicitly that they want to weaken requirements for that theories have to be tested. So, I honestly, if you're arguing for that, it's because your theories are shit. Or we've hit a wall of human perception or human intelligence or the ability for humans to understand. There's absolutely no way a hypothesis that can't be tested is scientific, in my opinion. That really is. Right there, that is the destruction. That is the destruction of the scientific method, the Enlightenment crashing and burning. There's no way around it. But, it's psychology, it's pseudoscience, it's phenomenology. If and that's the direction I think that we're headed. The scientific world seems to be sort of headed that way. If nothing else, all this environment, this whole idea of weather change, and the modeling of the pandemics and all that. Very good demonstration of that, right? Regardless of how you feel about either of those subjects, you could agree, if you understand at all, the terrible tragedy of the models that have been being used in both examples. That's all I'm referring to, not the validity of the arguments either way. I really don't know, because there aren't any good models to explain it. So I have absolutely no idea what's going on with any of it. But anyway, so that's one way I would use this. The other way I would use this is that this really, even if you're doing hardcore hardcore science fiction campaign world, nothing is really off the table. You can introduce faster than light drives, you can introduce all kinds of craziness, anything that you can come up with. As long as the aliens that came up with it have an experience completely outside of the human experience, then it's entirely possible, in fact probable, that they would discover laws and realities of the physical world that we're incapable of just because of our own limitations. I really like that. The other thing that I really like too is that this sort of made me aware of the idea of differential equations and how they're a great model for explaining how things interact, how things maybe move around. I don't like them as an explanation of what things are. So, for example, you could make up a differential equation that, say, showed how a truck moves down the highway. Perhaps it includes some of the weight, something like that. You could have a differential equation that shows all of that, but it doesn't explain a truck. It doesn't tell you what a truck is. And that's one of the things, these differential equations. They're handy, but they don't explain what the thing is. And they don't, because we can't see it. I mean, once you get down to minute details, or once you get, so far away from the planet for observations, you can't tell anymore. So I understand it. It's just that it's a human limitation. Perhaps AIs can overcome it one day. And that might be something that I would use in a campaign world two. World 2 would be super science things that AIs have figured out, but people can't understand it. And an AI maybe is willing to try and explain it to humans. Humans so far, maybe over the past 400 years, have never been able to understand it. That would be fantastic. Reminds me of an experiment that I heard about where the scientists took 2 AIs and taught them basic principles of mathematics, addition and subtraction, and let the computers kind of build off of each other and create new theories of mathematics. And no, I think I'm conflating two. No, it was a computer they taught how to, that's right, it was an AI that they taught how to do math. And then they allowed it to start creating math. And within like a week, the thing had come up with trigonometry, had come up with calculus, had come up with all this stuff. But then a little bit later, it started coming up with what people described as crazy and didn't make any sense. And so they turned off the computer. Yeah. And these are supposed to be smart people. Turned off the computer. So, yeah. I'm thinking... this is a great book. I highly recommend this book if you're interested in science. It's well written, it's funny, it's challenging, it's got lots of great interviews with very famous people. She's an absolute delight. Highly recommend this. If you like this video, please leave a like, please subscribe. If you're listening on Rumble, please follow, please leave a rumble. And I appreciate you taking the time to listen to me blather on about Lost in Math. Oh, and she's got a great YouTube video, our YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the bottom. All right, talk to you later.